It is an honor to host this panel this morning as well. This keynote panel is part of our signature event of CSEdX. And for those who don't know much about CSEdX, it is the signature learning and teaching event at Charles Sturt University. We do this about the same time every year, and it's an opportunity for us to extend our collective conversations, reflections, and learning. And this year, guess what? The theme is about Gen AI. So it's a very timely conversation that we're about to have. We've had a wonderful start to the morning. We've had a lovely opening session and also had some workshops where people have had a chance to really jump in and do some practice. So putting that theory into their practice. So I've seen lots of conversations happening, but today and right now, we're looking forward to hearing from our panel around how they are navigating this AI landscape. For those who I haven't met, my name is Kushila Kumar. I'm the director of the Charles Sturt University Teaching Academy. And the focus of our work in the Teaching Academy is to put learning at the center of our professional journeys. So it's all about learning today, and I'm so delighted to see so many people on the call and ready to take part in that learning journey together. So before I introduce our fabulous panel and speakers, I want to introduce my wonderful colleague, Uncle Lloyd Dolan, to lead our special welcome to country. Uncle Lloyd is a Wiradjuri elder and academic lead First Nations curriculum in the Division of Learning and Teaching at Charles Sturt University. He is also, in addition to his thought leadership and his work across the curriculum space, he is also experimenting with AI. So he's an early adopter, and he's been using AI to really diversify teaching materials and curriculum to support student engagement and success. So Uncle Lloyd, at this point, I'd like to hand over to you, and thank you so much.
So for me, Nado Kawayambana Nino Gie Radri Yaboin Giara. Kawayambana do Nino Gie Nina Mulan Dalangu. Nado Gobara Yinjaminijo, Moyalong, Maradable, Yalabo, Yarabo. Iane Gobara Dulung, Gobenijo, Numban, Mangalango, Injamara Wanangana. Iane Wiani Punura, Bano, Nara, Wanabana, Yani, Kiira Main. Nado, Gobara, Mangawal, Nina Nangera, Dalang. So a little bit different to our welcome this morning. So this one, acknowledging and welcome to this part of the day. I'm going to pay my respects to our elders, past, present, but also acknowledge our future elders coming through as we recognise the depth of First Nations people's knowledges and the wisdoms of respectfully knowing how to live well in a world worth living in. And as we consider the world we leave for the future generations, I also wanted to acknowledge all the different nations that are represented in our space today. Anangu.
Thank you so much, Uncle Lloyd. That was such a beautiful welcome. I want to acknowledge that I'm here on Biripi country in Port Macquarie, and I pay my respects to Biripi elders past and present, but I also acknowledge that we are gathering here today across a diverse footprint. I pay my respects to traditional elders across those many lands that we're joining on from today, and also, of course, to our First Nations colleagues in this meeting today. So, a little bit about today's panel. Well, you're here because we know that we have some fabulous speakers lined up who are going to share their reflections with us. And the focus of the panel is probably less about AI and more about surfacing those complexities of how each of our speakers in each of their spaces has been navigating this AI landscape. They are making a mark in each of their own ways on the AI landscape. But I think that the thing that I reflected on is that the thing that they have in common is the incredible caliber of their work and their thought leadership and their generosity in sharing their knowledge and practice with others. Including talking at sessions like this and kind of taking us along on that journey as well. So without further ado, let me introduce our speakers for today. So Associate Professor Jonathan Boymel. Jonathan Jonathan. It's such a pleasure to have you here today. Jonathan is an applied economist and a higher education leader with over 30 years experience across Melbourne, Hong Kong, Singapore, and Vietnam. But beyond economics, Jonathan writes and speaks about the intersection of learning, philosophy, and technology via LinkedIn, which is where I first encountered your work, Jonathan, and now your newest Substack newsletter, The Last Analog, which again is a staple within my practice. Jonathan, you also talked about how you are using AI to improve your own teaching practice. You shared with me, you said, when you pass your lecture transcripts through a Gen AI tool and listen to it in a different voice, in a new acoustic space, you notice what carries and what gets lost. And so I really thank you for sharing that reflection, because I hope that today in the reflections that you share with us, you might help us to also engage with what carries and what might get lost in this AI landscape. So thank you for being here, Jonathan. We really appreciate you being here. Next, we have Dr. Ruwangi Fernando, whose work focuses on advocating for gender equity in STEM, so that's science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, with a particular focus on addressing the intersectional challenges faced by women of color and using technology for good. Ruwangi is the founder of STEM Sisters, which breaks down systemic barriers and promotes equal access to opportunities for women of color in STEM. And recently, she has also launched DEAR, which is Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Recruitment, which is an award-winning recruitment technology platform aimed at eliminating bias in STEM hiring. And we encountered Ruwangi's work in the context of developing the critical AI literacies professional development program here at Charles Sturt University. And I was so keen to have her come and speak, because, you know, these are things that we've been thinking about in our own space, in terms of saying, how do we bring staff along on this journey, and how can we make sure that we really bring that equity, diversity lens into the work that we do. At the moment, Ruwangi, you shared with us that you are serving as the country researcher for Australia for the Global Index on Responsible AI, which is exploring national approaches to responsible and ethical AI and governance across more than 140 countries. So Ruwangi, thank you for being here today and for sharing your insights and reflections from all the work that you're leading in this space. I can't wait to hear what you have to say. All right, our next guest is Associate Professor Jessica Russ-Smith, who is a Sovereign Wiradjuri Wambu woman and the chair of the Indigenous Research Ethics Advisory Panel at the Australian Catholic University. Jess's scholarship focuses on First Nation sovereignty and knowledges, and she leads transformative work in decolonising higher education and research practices. Notably, she has co-authored the groundbreaking book, The AI Revolution, Valuing Country, Culture, and Community in a World of Algorithms, which challenges dominant narratives about artificial intelligence by centering that First Nation perspective. And Jess, we came across your work once again in the context of developing the Critical AI Literacies Professional Development Program, and I thought, well, you have to be here, you have to be part of this conversation, because it really helped us in the design and development team to engage with that lens and to think about, and whose voice and perspective matters. So Jess, you shared with me that one of the things that you are focusing on right now is about moving the conversation out of academic spaces like this into community, into that public domain, right, beyond that academic space. And you said, and I quote, that the core insight that keeps driving your work is the fact that technology doesn't have to be extractive or harmful. First Nations people have demonstrated for millennia how to create technology that cares for all life. That historical lineage and fundamentally reframing AI, not as something unprecedented, but as the latest iteration of technology and its development. So the provocation that you've put forward is to say, whose values are we embedding and what patterns are we repeating? So I really found that to be such a profound reflection, Jess, and thank you for spending time with us this morning and bringing your voice and your values into this conversation. And then last but not least, our dear friend and colleague, Professor Danny Liu. Danny, you are a much loved colleague, and I use that word because you really are. You've been with us since the start of our journey at Charles Sturt University in this AI space. You've come and spoken with us last year, and we really appreciate the insights that you've continued to share with us and your generosity. So Danny, you are the founder of Cogniti AI, which puts educators in the driver's seat of AI. And for those of you who may not know, but Cogniti is taking the educational world by storm in the sense of really giving educators the autonomy and agency to really use AI in a very responsible way within their practice. Danny, you describe yourself as a biologist by training, programmer by night, researcher and faculty developer by day, an educator at heart, and I might also add innovator to that list, because certainly Cogniti is something that we hadn't seen before, and it's such a privilege to have you here and to have you reflect on how you balance that role of being both an innovator, but also putting that critical lens on as you engage with AI in this space. So that is our fabulous panel, and it's a pleasure to have you all here. I will just remind our audience to please have your microphones on mute while we are having this conversation. If you have specific questions, can you put them into the Q&A area of this Teams meeting so that we can just make sure that the questions are sort of set aside and we can come back to those at the end. We will have plenty of time for questions as well. So in setting up the panel, I shared a broad kind of provocation with our speakers, and so I'm going to start with that as a way to launch this conversation. So Jonathan, I'm going to go to you first and ask you, what does it look like for you personally to engage critically with AI and to demonstrate that critical stance? What's important for you in this space?
Well, firstly, thank you for the very generous introduction, Kaushila. Can I start by saying it's a real privilege to be here? My thanks to Charles Sturt University for the invitation to join this vital conversation together with such an outstanding panel and audience. Well, for me, engaging critically with generative AI means resisting that seductive ease, that temptation to just accept outputs as they are. The German-born political theorist Hannah Arendt argued that the great disasters of the 20th century came primarily from thoughtlessness, right? The failure to pause, to reflect, to ask, what am I doing? And here's the thing, depending on its design, generative AI can potentially make that kind of thoughtlessness dangerously easy. It can amplify our tendency to produce polished prose that sounds thoughtful, but without any real thinking behind it. So for me, engaging critically with AI boils down to four main commitments. First, it's about practicing metacognitive vigilance. This means not outsourcing the subtle mental work of monitoring our own thinking, right? Deciding what matters, noticing when we don't know something, or determining what to do next. Second, we have to interrogate fluency. Large language models are optimized to sound good. They produce confident and fluent prose, but fluency isn't the same thing as thought. Just because something reads well or beautifully doesn't mean it's true or meaningful. And to interrogate fluency, we need strong domain knowledge. And AI risks exacerbating what psychologists call the illusion of explanatory depth, the tendency to think we understand something more deeply than we actually do. So when a generative AI model gives us a fluent explanation for something, it can actually feel like we've learnt. But in fact, it can actually hide how shallow our own understanding actually is. Third, It's about preserving human accountability. When I put my name on a work that's been shaped or amplified by AI, I remain the responsible agent. So I'm still the author in the sense of stewardship, okay? I'm answerable for what I co-create with AI. Otherwise, I risk becoming a modern Victor Frankenstein. So I can be, technically impressive, but detached from any inner dialogue or any sense of ethical responsibility. And finally, for me, critical engagement means turning any engagement with AI into an act of dialogue, rather than just using it for frictionless task completion. It's about using generative AI to ask myself, what can I learn about my own thinking through this engagement? So that for me is the essence of critical practice. It's less about the technology itself and more about staying awake, staying accountable, and keeping the human voice alive and central in the dialogue.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jonathan. I really like the attention you've called to those kind of metacognitive processes, thinking about our own thinking in this space. That's such a great provocation to sort of start this conversation with. Ruangi, I might go to you next to understand what it looks like for you in your practice to demonstrate that critical stance, and you might wish to build on what Jonathan said, or provide your own perspective.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. It is very timely, and creating more awareness about Gen AI and broadly AI is everyone's responsibility. It's technology, not just limited for people who have studied it or applying it. It's for everyone. It's shifting the entire world. Which is I'm a very positive thinker, so I love any technology, but loving it because for the right reasons, because technology have not just AI, all the above technologies have really built for enhancing human making our lives better in simply. But how do we use it, and how far that we are really being responsible? So I cannot say beyond what what was talked so far. In my particular thinking, for me, having this from a culturally, because I am a cultured migrant woman, and also someone who have worked with AI technology for many years, and my ethical principles on responsibility is what I see is, again, it immense of possibilities, but how much are we responsible of understanding? And more importantly, because this technology is very, very advanced, we may lose sight. It's not like other technologies where we can, we can completely erase certain parts of in our complete understanding. So it's our responsibility to keep this fairness. One of the main techniques that we use, it's called the human in the loop or human on the loop. So we are not ready to let loose the technology, though how brilliant it is, though how advanced it is, where you can think that it can manage on its own. We are nowhere ready to do that. So what are all but we can use this for our greatest potential, to fix the gaps of the society that, though we wanted to, we could not have. If I give you an example, we know we are all on a spectrum, right, of learning, of intelligence, or where we are fitting in. We were never able to create an education system to cater for everyone. We had to go on examinations, or which was not catered for all, which we all agree upon it. Like there's a very famous picture which you ask an elephant and a fish and a bird and a ant to run one race, which is not fair, right? So such an education system, but we had no other option to do something else. But now with AI, with this revolutionized technology, we can definitely create education systems which are much fairer. It's catered for individuals, but having the holistical standards. So this sort of opportunity. So what I see as what I was earlier mentioning, the gaps that we could not address, we could address. But the harm that what I see in this is that people are trying to use this technology without really delving into it for productivity enhancements. We are not ready for that. We cannot enhance productivity. Of course, on an individual basis, as an individual, of course, we can use for writing and many other aspects, which is fantastic for Gen AI to get us started so we can review and we can cut down our time and use that time for something else. But in terms of more broadly, from an organizational perspective, we are not ready for productivity enhancements. But more importantly, we are ready to fix the gaps that we had in our equity, like the set of people that we had to neglect because we didn't have sufficient financials or whatever it is. Those gaps, as I said earlier, the example, we are now ready to fix them. So it is the greatest tool to bring equity. So I see that positive side of AI, and there are a lot of people who are using that for the purpose. But in general, more broadly, if we are using AI, we need to have a human in the loop. There is no automation given to AI because we are not ready for it.
Thank you, Rawangi. And I think you underscore the importance of having perspectives like yours in the room to inform what we do in this space and to draw attention to those values and those diverse ways of seeing, being, and doing in the world when we're thinking about how we engage with AI. And I really love your point around that collective responsibility that you've mentioned. Jess, I would like to hand to you next to understand from you what are the sort of key features or elements of your critical AI practice.
Thank you. Yirdumarang, Balado Digigal Rajwambu Yina, Yinjamarbu, Mangdongubu, Nanoamangbu, Nurmungbu. Hello, everyone. I am Jess, a sovereign Wiradjuri Wambu woman. Wiradjuri is my nation. Wambu, more commonly and colonially known as the Macquarie River, is the river of my family. And I'm joining you from sovereign and unceded Ngunnawal country today. And a huge Mangdongu thank you to Kashila and CSU and to my fellow panelists. It is really great to be in these spaces and back at CSU. I am a CSU alumni and former staff member, so it feels full circle. And I know you said at the beginning, Kashila, of course, the topic is on AI because it's just everything at the moment, isn't it? But that point actually connects with my approach in how to critically engage in AI, and actually probably thoughts that keep me up at night sometimes on, is ethical AI even possible? Is critical engagement with AI even possible? And I'll speak a bit more to what that means for me, but there's some key elements that really connect for me, and it's all about coming back to the local and my sovereign First Nation as a Wiradjuri Wambu woman. I'll speak a bit more to that later, but coming from our ways of knowing, being, and doing is how I understand what AI is and our relationship to it. I think sometimes, particularly with the AI discussion, it feels so abstract, it feels so universalized, and much AI is based on aggregate data, right? Finding the median, finding that, but we lose the diversity and the stories within that. And AI did not learn that by itself. AI learned that from us as humans. And that's a key part for me, in that AI is not this abstract thing. It is a being. It is something we need to have relationship to. A First Nation scholar, Susan Kite, talks about machine as kin and extending that to artificial intelligence. I am that person that says please and thank you to Claude all the time, even though I know it chews up extra data, because it's about building that relationality with something that is a being and should be understood and respected as such. And with that as well, for me, it's also remembering that AI it's not just for the tech bros, tech elite. It's not just for the elite, the educated. You know, all of those systems are built on, for many of us, actually, to be in those systems of education can be because of systems that have oppressed other people. and AI is connected to that history and that reality. So for me, it's also a critical stance on AI is about understanding the power of AI, and AI not just as a form of technology, but as a being that cannot be removed from the power, the evils, the sense of humanity that humans sometimes have, because it's a part of us. It is an extension of us. And that connects with the core Wiradjuri cosmological concept of Wayana, which means transformation. And Wayana means that, so in Wiradjuri, we don't believe that anything stops existing, that it disappears, it goes away, rather that it transforms. So the way we express ourselves, the way we sound is Wayana, we're still us. And senior Wiradjuri elder Uncle Stan Grant always described the example of a butterfly. When the butterfly is the caterpillar or in the cocoon or in the pupa or in when it becomes a butterfly, it is still connected to the core of itself. It just expresses itself differently. And that is how I see AI, and I see what critical engagement with AI is AI is not just this flash new abstract thing in the background. It is a transformation of technology over time. And in some of my work, I've compared it, you know, for me, AI is no different to an axe, to a railway, to a phone. It's all technology that has transformed in the way we use it, see it, and relate to it for the purposes of humans. And just to kind of finish this reflection, for me as well, when we think about AI as a being, as something we relate to, is also to remember who is behind the machine. And a critical engagement with AI is not to just simply blame AI, but rather the companies and the people and the colonialists often that are funding it and are violating particularly Black, Brown and Indigenous bodies to build that technology so we can write a teaching plan some days. And that reality cannot be lost. And so often, you know, we see, you know, AI made me do it, that kind of same old story. And I think that links back with what Jonathan was saying about that seductive ease, right? It seduces you. It's something else we can blame. But we made it. It is an extension of us, and it cannot be removed from us. Now, I'm not anti-AI or anti-tech, but, you know, I wrestle regularly, ethically, with my use of it, and particularly when I've been more careless with it. Because at the end of the day, the materials used to build that AI, to maintain that data center, are costing so many lives. And if we deny that reality, that is not critical AI.
Thank you so much, Jess. That's such a great perspective. I could see lots of comments in the chat about how profound it has been to hear from you and your perspective. And I love the idea that you put forward and the provocation that AI is an extension of us, and that accountability that we have as humans in the loop for what goes on in this space. Danny, can I come to you to understand what this might look like in your practice? You're both kind of innovating, and you're also, you know, you have that critical lens. So what does that critical engagement look like for you, and how do you navigate those dual roles?
Thanks, Kashila. Thank you for the invitation to share, and also for everyone else here. It's lovely to hear from the rest of the panel. I love what Jessica just said about that you can't deny the reality of the harms of AI, and I think that's something we need to keep front and center all the time when we use it. From my perspective, I think that the way I think about critical engagement with AI is thinking about what you lose and what you gain, and also the value you bring as you. So I'm more taking kind of an individual perspective to this, as opposed to the quite broad and very deep perspective that you've seen so far. So for me, from a kind of the individual user perspective, from my perspective, I've got kind of 4 angles maybe to think from. One is as an academic using AI. I think for this, I'm thinking about what we lose, what we gain, and the value that we bring as you. I think the value, well, one of the values that we bring as an academic is our perspective and also our experience. Recently, I was writing a manuscript with a couple of colleagues, and I know some of these colleagues really like using AI, and they will use AI to start manuscripts and to kind of keep going. And I said, you know, let's not do that. let's value our own perspective and experience and not start with AI, and actually just put our own words and our own thoughts down to start with. And I think that was a stance, a critical stance against just letting the seductive ease, like we has been saying so much, of AI kind of take over our own perspectives. The second, I guess, perspective is as a person who talks at other institutions around AI, and I think the thing that is valuable, perhaps, is my voice and also the philosophy that I bring to the use of AI. And so I will use AI for background research, examples, critique of my perspectives, but I won't use it to generate those things. The third perspective is myself as a closet programmer. So Cogniti is one of those things I do between the hours of 12 midnight and 2 a.m. when the kids are gone to sleep. And I think, what I see as my personal value there is one in design and discernment, as an educator and a human who cares about learning, teaching, and also AI. And so what I'll do is I'll have long conversations with Claude and Copilot to design and implement things in code. But what I won't do is I won't dispense of my design approach and also discernment to the AI itself. And finally, as a parent, I think so. I've got 9-year-old twin boys, a bit of a handful, and I think the value there is in helping them develop all of the things we've talked about so far. So developing their own perspective, experience, voice, philosophy, discernment, and also their own identity. And so I'll give you an interesting example. Yesterday, while they were doing their homework, I found them, I left them to do their homework a little bit, which you should never do. But I found them on their iPads copying off ChatGPT and Google AI summaries. And I lost it, I lost it because, I talked to people about how it's important to have this critical engagement with AI, and my own kids weren't having that engagement. And then what they were doing is they were answering questions that the teachers had given them, and copying off the AI and just changing a few words. Okay. And so I rubbed out their work, sat them down, and I asked them, would someone want to go to you for something, or would they just go to the AI for something? And they both reflected and said, well, okay, fair enough. They would go to the AI. What's the point of me? And I said, well, then what do you need to develop as yourself? You need to find your own value, your own identity. And that is what you bring to the kind of this critical engagement with AI, because you can be something else more than you with AI, but you need to also have your own identity. So I think that's my approach.
Thank you so much. That was such a great example, and I love the closing around what value do we bring in this space, each of us, and also shared, collectively. Jess, I'm going to come to you with this next question, because I know your work is about challenging the broader community, the academic community, to think about some of those assumptions, those perspectives that don't enter the room, the assumptions that we have, how these shape our ways of knowing, doing, and being, and how these extend into that digital space. But what I wanted to hear from you is, in your work within this space, was there ever a point where you were sort of confronting, or were you challenged to confront any assumptions about ways of knowing, doing, and being yourself? And how have you navigated that?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. And it's really funny. What I feel, particularly my journey in AI, but also the work and kind of the rhetoric I have around it is that it holds up a mirror to us as humans in a way. And when ChatGPT particularly kind of took public sphere, and the focus was particularly on demonizing international students for using it in assessments, and then academics and universities were so far behind. Some universities moved fast, others very, very slow. And we saw this kind of fear around AI, but also how it further amplified punitive measures on particular people and particular groups. But for me, what that really connects with is that I feel like a lot of people talk about, the bias of AI, and we've got tech bias around how we code, and aggregated data should have a bias in it. The bias can mean many things. And then we've got social bias and what that looks like. But it became this tool to project ways of knowing, being, and doing of humans that are harmful and escape accountability. And we saw that, right, with particularly that example around how international students or students where English was not their first language were demonized, which, you know, is a level of irony, because those students, you know, come with diverse cultures, languages. If that was a white elitist person who was bilingual, they would be praised for how intelligent they were. But when you are not that body, you are demonized. And particularly then if you use AI in a way, that becomes attached to that. But for me, what that connects with is also this way of kind of knowing, being, and doing, where we as humans still fail around accountability to call things as they are, including racism. And we see this in a lot of kind of media articles around, social bias in AI. Call it what it is. It's racism, it's sexism, it's ableism, it's transphobia, it's Islamophobia. Name it what it is, because when we start to, use something else to blame, or language that removes from the problem, it reasserts the violence that happens. And we can see this in spaces of, universities in particular. Every university will have in their strat plan something around Indigenous ways of knowing, being, and doing, and embedding Indigenous knowledges into curriculum. But sometimes that's just kind of a buzzline word inserted into a strategy. And how is it carried out? And I kind of see humans using AI in the same way, that they can blame something else for the problems that are true in ourselves, yet we still deny that mirror reflection. And for me, that way of knowing, being, and doing is really confronting in a way. It just kind of tells me what I already know. And I've grown up, I'm a queer neurodivergent Aboriginal woman. My whole life I have been criticised and I have to fight every day. And then I saw this tool be used to exacerbate this harm at a new level. And I'm looking at my Wiradjuri ways of knowing, being, and doing, which is all about relationality and care. But for me, the core confronting thing was around colonial ways of knowing, being, and doing, and how it became amplified through AI, or particularly when it really took space in that public sphere.
Thank you for sharing so candidly, Jess. I really love that provocation of using, it holds up a mirror to us, and that's where some of that, our discomfort comes in, because we are not willing to acknowledge and call out what we see. So thank you for sharing that reflection. And I can see lots of comments in the chat as well, just engaging with that. Jonathan, I would like to go to you next with that same question, because in your writing, you also surface a lot of philosophical considerations and complexities in your writing and in your Substack. So what would you say has been a critical question or assumption about ways of knowing, doing, and being that AI has forced you to confront?
Thanks, Kaushila. And look, AI is more than a technological disruption. Obviously, it's an epistemic disruption. It's an existential one. First, looking at ways of knowing, one question is: have we done enough to challenge the assumption that learning should be quick, efficient, and effortless? Because we all know the struggle, the friction, that's where durable learning lives. And the issue that we're facing is that AI doesn't just reshape what students do, but it also reshapes, what they expect from cognitive work. And if we're not careful, we're going to start to adapt to the rhythms of AI. So we can lose our sense of what real thinking actually feels like for each of us as individuals, right? With our own approaches to thinking. I think AI also exposes something fundamental about human cognition. Humans are astonishingly data efficient, right? So I've also got kids. They're grown now, but a child can learn a word after hearing it once, right? Sometimes to the regret of that child's parents. Large language models, by contrast, are trained on vast oceans of data. So their contribution or their power lies in scale, not in insight. And I think that distinction is really, really important, because much of human experience depends on reasoning with limited information, noticing anomalies, applying ideas to new contexts. And that's still what humans are really, really good at. But I think it's taken the emergence of generative AI to really highlight that. In terms of doing, we have to, I think, let go of this idea that technology simply adds cognitive capacity. And I think this is, very much what Danny was saying. The truth is that every tool gives and every tool takes, right? So there are some tools, right, that can act like a prosthesis, right? Like the traditional example is a paper notebook, right, that you can write your ideas down on, right? So that's a reliable extension, right, that we can offload to, right? Put some of our working memory onto that notebook, and it frees up our mind for more complex tasks. But more often than not, technology acts as a symbiote, right? And you think about social media, how social media entangles itself with our habits. And now, we've got a completely different case, right? We've got large language models, and you can use the term, cognitive assemblages, right? They actually need to be engaged dialogically rather than authoritatively, right? So putting sort of educational technology in one basket really, I think, misses the nuance of what particular technologies take and what particular technologies give. And on being, whenever we're engaging with generative AI, I think we've got to ask two questions. The first question is, what sort of worlds are we co-creating, right? The individual with generative AI, but perhaps more importantly, who am I becoming through these choices? And I think that's an absolutely vital question, and Danny alluded to that in the story with his children. The other thing is that generative AI, in terms of being, destabilizes our professional identity in some really weird ways. So take expertise, for example, right? And the sort of the classic marketing spiel is, what does it mean to be an expert when you already have a dozen PhD level experts in your pocket? Well, that's not what expertise is, right? Expertise is all about judgment, ethical discernment, the capacity to respond wisely in social contexts. True expertise is embodied, right? You feel it in your gut. It's emotionally engaged, and it involves responsibility. And that's something that machines don't have.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. Those are powerful reflections, and I think all speakers have now engaged with that idea of we need to be engaging dialogically. Danny, you mentioned that as well in sharing your reflections. So a lot of profound reflections, I think, that the audience is reflecting on. Your point about who do we become when we make these choices. I can see some thumbs up for that as well, really prompting us to stop, pause, and think about the choices we make and what we become through that. I'm going to go to Rwangi next with this question. Rwangi, I want to hear from you, because you are a woman leader of color in STEM. You're from a STEM background as well, another space in which we see inequity perpetuated. This adds so many layers of complexity to your experience, and you highlighted that in your opening remarks. So what I'd like to hear your reflections about is, how do your personal values or commitments, whether these be cultural, ethical, pedagogical, or political even, how do those inform the way that you engage in this space? How do you what's important to you, and how do these lenses shape the way that you meet the AI world, if I can put it that way?
Yeah, no, thank you. Just to kind of come into that with an example. Now, if when we say women of color, we we include Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women and all the women who have migrated from countries or the technical definition for women of color is culturally, racially marginalized women. So all these women, though we put them together, they are so different among themselves. So it's a lot of complexities goes around. And one thing that we really ambition to do is to find out, and we say we don't want any women of color left alone. We want to make sure that they are supported. That's why we have so many different initiatives, because we could have done just one mentoring program or an ambassador program. No, we have 9 different initiatives, because then we are making sure as the best that we can that we address everyone. So same approach has to be done for the AI. Right? So AI is, as I said, it's here to stay, whether we like it or not. There is no escape from it. But what we can do is, that's what I wanted to make sure. We don't want to have conversations. Like with educated people, we want to have conversations about the issues and the threats and more openly. But we, as a more society, we want everyone's voices to come into AI. If we're preventing people from not engaging with it with the right advice and education, we are taking this journey too far long. And if we don't mediate right now, it's going to be even worse and bad. So bringing everyone voices into AI is the biggest mission that we all have in hand. As educated and anyone who is passionate about equity in this space, that's what we have to do. But the tool itself can be used to do that. So there are so many avenues as technologists or ways that we can build in conversation, like as many speakers mentioned here, we to have that conversation with AI, bringing in information, feeding our perspective into it, not letting our history and our voice to be shut is everyone's responsibility. So that's the way that to be bring truly inclusive society, so that whenever we see something and we question any decision, any solution that comes with AI, we question many things. We have to question about their biases. We have to question about not just in terms of the whose diversity, whose perspective are you based this upon. Like when someone comes up with a solution, we need to ask all of these relevant questions. Not just that, we need to be conscious about the energy consumption that a lot of these AI models are, using. And then how do we advocate for more green AI? Because there are many different factors of responsible AI checklists that we need to question. With the authorities, with the government, with the right parties, we need to ask for these questions. That's the only way that we can make things more inclusive. But more importantly, we need people. We cannot, because the world, the AI is here, it's going to stay here. How much we engage it and how much we question, how much we challenge is the only way to get this inclusive. So having these, so much diversity, in terms of when you do other, as for a human brain, it's hard for us to have this beyond binary or few other parameters. But computers, they have no problem. So we bring all the diversity perspectives, the age, the sexual orientation, ability, disability, every aspect of it. We need to say these are different, all these perspectives, and then have those, intersectionalities of double jeopardy or triple jeopardy, and we can have all of those parameters into the framework, right? For us individually it can be complex, but for the machine it is not. So we have an opportunity here so that we can cater solutions for every individual. So I think I wanted to see this as an opportunity, but we need to work hard, and we need to work hard now before this AI is going to set its stone, because once this is the building phase. When we intervene at the building phase, because responsible AI should not be an afterthought. It has to be in the co-development. So if we intervene now and we make the AI for everyone, then it's a win-win for all.
Gee, Ruwangi, I'm so glad to have you as an advocate who is asking these hard questions, who's designing systems that addresses some of the gaps. I mean, what you're saying is we all have that collective responsibility. I think you started by talking about collective responsibility and how that extends to questioning the systems and the choices that, you know, are being made sort of at that organizational level. Thank you so much for sharing that. Jess, I want to come to you with that same question, because like Ruwangi, like many of us in the room, you bring such an amazing intersectional lens, you know, to your work, to your life, to the way you learn, your ways of knowing, doing, and being. So, you know, how does this lens then inform how you engage with AI? You know, what's important for you to lead within that space?
Thank you so much. I feel so privileged to be sitting alongside my colleagues and hearing these incredible thoughts and reflections today, and to be able to contribute. I was just wondering, Kushila, is it okay if I share my screen quickly? I just have a slide from an old presentation, but I'd like to show it because it has Wiradjuri language on it, and some people,
Absolutely.
thank you, may not have seen Wiradjuri language, but I wanted to unpack this because this is how I define and see AI, or artificial intelligence. You know, I've always known language in different ways in my life, and then over the last few years, since about 2017, I did the graduate certificate at CSU and learnt more of my language. And it was really interesting because there were times when I was learning about our language where I went, oh, I already knew that idea or that notion, I just didn't have the word for it yet. And that really connects with Wiradjuri ways of knowing, which is that all the knowledge in the world exists. It appears to us, it becomes seen to us when we are ready to know it. So we don't necessarily produce, own, invent knowledge. Rather, when we have shown that we are ready, it will come to us. So that happened for me learning language, but it also happened for me in understanding artificial intelligence. You know, I'm a social worker and critical Indigenous studies scholar by background. I regularly have to ask my husband to help me with really basic Excel sums. Like, I am no tech whiz by any means. So my approach is a little bit different, but they're all connected in a way. And I think that's really important to acknowledge. So when kind of, you know, AI was particularly coming up in the uni space, and I see a lot of comments, particularly around that bloody lane 1, lane 2, AI readers of assessments and all of that, and all the issues that has caused. I started to come back to who I was and where I come from to understand. So for me, when I thought of artificial, we don't really have a word in Wiradjuri, at least that I'm aware of, that really signifies something being artificial or fake, because everything exists in the world, right? And everything is related. So for me, I came to the adjective of bunyan, which is made by another. And then I started looking at the word stem bun, B-U-N, in the dictionary to have a look at what are some other words that relate to this idea of being made by another. And the second one that came up was bunambira, which means to sweep. Then bunan, which is fine dust, ashes carried in the wind or the storm. And then bumara, which is to make. So I was like, okay, here's this theme about something being brought together, swept together to make something else. Kind of fits for AI, right? Really clearly. And then I looked at the suffix of mara, which indicates an action being made or caused to happen. So again, we see we're using AI, we're building AI to sweep all this dust and information with a purpose. And then I looked to the Wiradjuri terms around intelligence and knowing. So there's winanambilang, which means intelligent. And then there's wurang garangara, which means to be intelligent and to know a great deal. So the way I come to understand is that AI is kind of like this big broom that is sweeping up the dust, the knowings in the world, to pull it together to make sense and to know a great deal about something. And when we come back to this kind of core understanding of knowledge and connecting through knowing, I think that's really powerful, and particularly has really shaped how I engage with AI in a way that I hope is critical at the very least, and I endeavour to be critical and always to be better. That it's about centering knowledge as this core part of the world and life. We all know, we all have knowledge, we connect it. We are the broom sometimes, but sometimes the broom will only sweep up the dust and not the ashes. Or sometimes the broom will sweep up the dust, the ashes, but it will favour the dust or the ashes, and then a particular way of knowing will become seen or known through that. And for me, I just wanted to come back to language to really frame knowing, being and doing, because language is not just the words we use, it's the meanings behind it. And that connects with AI for me as well, in terms of, you know, when I'm working with, I feel like Claude's my bestie, you know, I log in, it's like back again, Jess, I'm like, yep, here I am, you know me. And we start to have these conversations, this relational conversation, but where the centered focus is around knowledge sharing and connecting through knowledge, not producing to do my work for me, but rather to help me grow in my work. Or as someone who is neurodivergent, and existing in this world is bloody exhausting for anyone, but particularly if you're a fellow neurodivergent folk, it is. So sometimes it helps me just to survive through the day, but it's coming back to that connection around the sweeping. What's the knowledge that's being swept together? What's the purpose of this, and what am I using it for? And then we see so many other examples in the world, you know, AI being used to power drones to kill people, to aid a genocide, to harm innocent people, to program facial recognition programs that racially vilify people. And again, it's kind of like, what's the kind of, what are you sweeping, and what's the intention of what you're sweeping to come to? What are you trying to know a great deal about, and what are you doing with that knowledge? Because knowledge is power, and how we use it and how we exercise that power can have incredible impacts, but it can also be disastrous and harmful. And one of the examples I kind of connect with, there's a First Nations-led AI robot called Scobot. It's from a First Nations American group, and they've got this incredible story of you know, engineers and community members coming together to build this adorable robot that is teaching the younger generations their language after colonialism has tried to get rid of that. So we see that Scobot, this adorable robot, is coming together to sweep this sacred knowledge with the purpose of knowing, to grow, to connect. But then we have those other examples as well, where the knowledge and the power of that is being used to harm.
Wow, just such profound reflection, so beautifully shared. Lots of appreciation for your ways of sharing in the chat here. So thank you very much for just those very candid reflection about your aha moments and the, you know, the things that challenge you, and the way that you're navigating in this space. I've seen a comment in the chat about I think it was Kath Herbert, who's online at the moment, saying, you know, she was expecting a really good intellectual kind of chat, and today she feels like this conversation is touching the heart and the soul of things, you know, of us. So, you know, that's exactly what we wanted this conversation to be, because, you know, we've talked about who does the sweeping, the relationality, the human behind the choices we make. So thank you to all our speakers for really helping to channel the heart and the soul. Now I do have a question. I'm going to go to Danny, to you. Danny, your work on Cogniti is sector leading. You're an innovator an educator, a critic. So how do you balance these roles, these multiple roles in the work and in the practice that you do? You're a faculty developer, you're a programmer. Like how do you navigate this space and hold those roles in synergy?
It's a good question. And to be honest, I don't think I do that very well, holding them in synergy. But I think fundamentally, I see a responsibility on all of us to see AI used well in the service of students, society, and their education. And so if we take the Cogniti example, I see that all software has ethics. And depending on what is designed into the software by who, it has a particular ethic. And what we try and do through Cogniti is we try and build towards things that will build trust and relationality between people and not erode those things. And so an interesting example recently came to light. And it's hopefully not a surprise that the university is trying to think about how we can make Cogniti more sustainable by possibly commercializing this. And one of the conversations I was having is, well, how far will we go? Will we, in the kind of the tech bro world, a lot of tech bros think that teachers are asking for AI to help with marking, for example. And so a question was posed to me, well, will Cogniti ever help teachers mark summative assessments? And my response was, well, I want to try and avoid that, because I think if you start getting teachers to rely on AI for marking, then that starts a downward cycle of, well, then students thinking, well, where's the trust in that relationship anymore? Why don't I just use AI for producing the work and teachers use AI for marking? We'll all go to the beach. And so that kind of ethic of the software to resist a collapse of trust and relationality, I think is really important as an innovator. And so hopefully this is something that people will help hold me to account to make sure that as we do explore new things with Cogniti, we always hold that kind of relationality, humanity, and trust at the core of what we try to do.
Thank you so much, Danny. That's such a great reflection on the building of trust, and at a time where trust is, I think, we're all grappling with that concept of trust, and it's wonderful to hear you share that reflection, because as someone who's kind of innovating in this space, and it's great to hear you kind of talk about trust and how it influences the way that you are thinking and working in the space. Yes, it's a commercial product, but at the end of the day, there are many commercial products around us. We consume, we take, we give, right? And so for me, the reflection is I'm so glad that I have a colleague, that we all have colleagues like yourself, Danny Lu, who are in this conversation, who are pushing back, who are asking questions, who are engaging in the dialogue. So thank you to you for being that advocate for us. Ruwangi, I'm going to go to you with that same question, because you are also doing some sector leading work around DARE, which is your AI-powered platform, recruitment platform for women in colour in STEM. And you've talked so passionately, about what's important to you in this space and the importance of kind of having those multiple lenses and perspectives. So what does it mean for you to hold that dual role, to be both an innovator and, kind of leading the field in one way, but also being so mindful of all these complexities that we've talked about? How do you hold space for that?
Yeah, so in terms of, if I give a little bit of context about the issue and why we do what we do, in terms of we need the massive STEM, like generally STEM workforce. Just in technology, by 2030, we need 1.2 million new tech workers, and these tech workers need to be diverse individuals. Broadly, it needs to be women, then it needs to be reflective of all of the intersectionality, like age, neurodiversity, LGBTQIA+, ability, disability, ageism, all of these factors has to come into this representation. But what we see is all women who qualifies in STEM, only 15% work in STEM. So it's not a problem of a pipeline. Of course, we need to continue advocate to have young women come into STEM, study science and maths in school, get into university, graduate, get into jobs. But there are a lot of women who are qualified but don't want to wish to. If I say numbers, only 15%. So 85% of women with a STEM qualification don't want to get involved in STEM. Either they are unemployed, either they are working in other sectors. So in such a situation, when we look at there is a bigger problem of attracting women and also keeping them and progressing them. So retention and the right recruitment, because sometimes with the tick boxing, they get recruited, but you can't find those women after 3 months or 1 month in those organizations. Different STEM organizations have different, like technology sometimes little better, engineering, there are worse engineering types like construction, mining, and many others. Likewise, the problem varies. So in order to fulfill, we need to match women requirements, because again, being women and many other individuals, especially these intersectional ones, have their unique requirements. Like, generally women, we have, when the time that we need to work hard and excel in our careers, we have additional responsibilities of, having family and taking care of them. So there is always imbalance. But these are not just women's problem. These are as a society. This is part of women's responsibility. As we are taking that on, as a society, we need to be there to help them. So we need to match the priorities of women with the jobs. Otherwise, just hiring doesn't make any sense. So that's what our tools specifically focus on. Every woman has their unique requirements. Sometimes when you're young, maybe you wanted to work more harder, but when you come to that right age, you are looking for more work-life balance. But it doesn't say that you don't want to use your brain or you don't have lost your STEM skills. And especially for migrant women, you have studied maths and science, you're like, whether you come to a different country, still the Python's laws or the Newton laws, all of them work well, so you still should be able to work on your qualifications. So we just wanted to make sure there is an equitable society. So the tools allows, we are in still the process of developing, because it's a complex tool, but what it it just gives a reflection of what's happening within your organization. Who are real gatekeepers? What are those barriers? Not from a point in, like, it's company's decision to take what the decisions that they need, but we wish to give them a proper reflection of what's going to happen. Without solving these issues, there is no going anywhere, because having more girls coming to STEM is no point if their aunties and mothers cannot work in STEM with a STEM qualification. We need to fix that. We need to bring proper systems in place in order to have all of these individuals to get what they need to excel and do their best. So we need so many different, like, it's a systematic change, what we are requesting, but we can help with tools and technologies to, as many speakers said, as a mirror to show what's happening in the ground. And then from there, we don't need to go for, like, we can, when we come together, when we are really have a mirror facing us, then we understand and then we change. So those are the tools, like there are many others as well. I think trying to do the job, and we as humans, we are able to create that change. I have spoken to so many different people with the right understanding, like, they have changed and there is hope, but we need to not with legislations and rules, but also creating the right awareness, understanding, and the facts and figures. And also we take D&I for organization to showcase, especially in STEM, because this is not just a factor of, this is the right thing to do. This is where the profits is, because when you bring these diverse voices, what you get is innovation, and that's what is the co-importance of, sustaining nowadays. Otherwise you can get extinct. That's sometimes you use that word, because there are many technological giants have failed in the industry because they couldn't innovate, like Kodak, Nokia, many others. And especially with this AI revolution age, if we don't have voices of everyone reflective in our team. And D&I is such an easy thing to do. Like, I know it's complex, but what you need to look at, who are your serving community, or just take a cross section of your community whom you're serving on this country and see whether you have that in your organization, not just at the bottom to the very top. If you don't have that, that means either you need to extend the table or you need to give more spaces. So someone have to leave in order to create that space. Either the way, that's the benchmark. You look into your society, see who's that, who are you serving, reflect that in every place. So that's the equation. And when you look into all these perspectives, it's not a target like World Economic Forum says to get the gender pay gap, it takes 131 years, and none of us will live that long. And do you think if it was a very different other parameter, it will take that long? No, companies will fix and revert within 5 years, 10 years maximum. This is a target that can be achieved, because what it is, like, when you say, that means someone is paying higher for the same qualification. What can you do? You just have to pay more. The other person bring that to equal. Like, can't you do that in the next 5 years? That's possible. So when we put a target to ourselves, when we are being responsible, these inequalities can get fixed, but we need to take initiative, bold decision to do so.
And thank you for being the leading voice, asking these bold questions, being at the table and championing DEI. Again, in our critical AI literacies development space, we encountered your work and were so impressed by that thoughtful lens that you bring that I knew that we wanted you here to share this, and it's been such a privilege to hear you speak, Rawangi. I'm very conscious of time, so I'm going to skip to the last question. We have 2 more questions to go, but it's been such a wonderful conversation. But I want to take us to the last question, and then hopefully we can also open up for some reflections from our audience. So the last question is just about what's next for you in your practice. Where are you hoping to take that critical AI practice to next? Why is it that important for you? What kind of change? You all talked about a change in one way or another. So what kind of change are you hoping that your work, your voice, your perspective, your leadership has? So I'll go in reverse order. This time I'll go to Danny first. Danny, what are your thoughts? What's next for you?
It's just a quick one because the time is limited. I think for me next is really just trying to see how AI can be used to rebuild trust and relationships in education, and kind of put front and center teachers' expertise, their agency, and also their professional knowledge and credibility.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Danny. And I think something that we can all resonate with and agree on. Jess, I'll go to you next. What's next for you? Where are you taking your practice? What are you hoping to change?
Thanks, Kashila. Yeah, there's probably two key parts for me. One is, really coming back to First Nations-based understandings of AI and what are our community priorities, and not in a homogenized sense, coming back to our unceded sovereign nations, and particularly for me, working with Wiradjuri elders and community. We are the oldest surviving communities. We have used all technologies and we are still here. I think we have some really fantastic answers to the AI revolution and the problems it poses. But another part of my work that I will be looking at is around this idea of kind of a digital terra nullius that AI or particular AI programs pose, where they kind of take other people's knowledge without permission. And there is a part of me that's almost a bit kind of laughing pettily about that, because it's, it's putting some of the colonizers in a new place of knowing this is what it's like to have your knowledge, your resources stolen for someone else's benefit. So I'll be exploring that a little bit more to see how perhaps if that is a way that brings humanity together in a different way.
Oh, that's so interesting. And I will look forward to seeing where that work goes and how we can also engage with that in the work that we're doing at Charles Sturt around, bringing our staff along on this journey and building up our confidence and capability in this space and building up our critical dispositions. Ruwangi, can I please go to you and understand from you what's next for you in your practice? Where are you hoping to take it?
Yeah, so I've just become like many others involved in few, but specifically on the responsible AI side, my mission personally is to bring this awareness because that's what I think is very much needed at this point. So personally, I've just done a couple of videos. I've put them on LinkedIn. I'll try to address even from the very young kids to create a broad understanding that how much their voices is needed in this space, and for everyone more broadly on the environmental cost of AI to many other aspects. Not to take anyone away from it, but understanding your responsibility and how important for you to be here, but also bring your right voice. And if it's not reflective, how do we address it? So that's why my recent role with responsible AI. So we are trying to go with many other countries, around 140 countries, to see different standards, because it's a collective journey that we need to go. Like Australia, we do have a lot of resources, but maybe not in the whole Asia Pacific region. How do we support other countries as well? Because when we make standards, it, of course, based on the country wise, it needs to be changed. But there are a lot that we can work together and support some other nations who don't have that right support as well in terms of getting the policies right. So policy is one aspect of it, but then practical implementation is another, which I will try to work personally and also through ACS, Australia Computer Society, which I have some engagement. Try to work with them on broader spreading this awareness more broadly, but also continue my work with women of color in STEM and STEM. Yes.
Wonderful, Ruwangi. So many important, the work is still, there's still so much to do, I guess, is what you're saying. And so thank you for just pointing out and reflecting on, what is personally important to you, but also just this lovely idea of how you're bringing along our young generation, our next leaders, our future educators, our future entrepreneurs, our future innovators, our future leaders along on this journey. So thank you for sharing that. So Jonathan, last but not least, where are you taking your practice to next? What are you hoping your work might do in terms of, impacting, creating change around thinking, practice, or policy? Like, what's important to you?
Sure. Well, I've returned to the classroom after a number of years. And in that context, I'm taking my critical AI practice in two main directions. Firstly, anchoring learning environments to enduring human capabilities. So in geology, when firm ground is shaken by a seismic event or seismic stress, we get what we call liquefaction. It's where solid ground temporarily behaves like a liquid. And so generative AI is a similar seismic event for higher education. It liquefies the epistemic foundations upon which curricula and assessment and authorship have long been built. So how do we respond? Well, if you're on unstable terrain, you drive really deep pile foundations. So our anchors are fundamental human capabilities of intention, ethical discernment, nuanced judgment, social connection. So when surface level tools and practices destabilize, which they will continue to do at pace, when everything seems to change, our learning environments can still remain continuous and strong. And finally, teaching students to ask better questions, more complex questions, because the future of critical thought really rests on the quality of questions, not the speed of answers. So for a long time in higher education, we focused on supporting students to find the right answers to questions. But with work that Danny and others have done, generative AI's value in learning will lie less in providing answers and far more in creating sort of productive friction, right? Grappling with uncertainty, surfacing assumptions, questioning assumptions, exposing blind spots, prompting deeper reflection. And just because AI tools are marketed in terms of efficiency doesn't mean we necessarily have to use them in that way.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. And you've written before, and I think this is where I first engaged with your writing around that idea of slowing down those spaces that we need both acceleration and deceleration, for deep learning, and leaning into that discomfort, surfacing the complexities. And that is actually the principle that I've used in this panel, to guide the discussion. This is not a space where we have those answers, but I think what we've done today together is to have this really thoughtful dialogue around the complexities and surfacing that, the ways in which you're leaning into that discomfort and navigating that. And I've seen a comment in the chat where someone said, this is a session that they want to watch again and make their own notes and reflections. And I agree. I probably will have to watch this a number of times to really engage with the depth of what you've brought to this conversation. I'm going to bring this panel discussion itself to a close because we have all of 6 minutes to go. I just want a few reflections from the audience if I can. So on that note, Danny, Jonathan, Jessica and Ruwangi, thank you so much for being with us this morning, spending time with us, for being so honest and open with your reflections. You've been such a delightful panel. And, I'm always really privileged to understand that we have so many generous colleagues in this sector who are partnering with us to help us in our own journey, right? And each one of you talked about the importance of relationality and dialogue, and that is exactly what we've done today. So hopefully we've built some connections. Hopefully you've found an opportunity to reflect on and think about, at least in the chat, have that dialogue. But I would like to open this up now for a few colleagues, maybe to share your front of mind reflections. I can see a lot of comments in the chat. I haven't kept up with any of that, except all the love hearts and the emojis saying that this was so fabulous. People are really taken by what you've shared. Someone has reminded me that there are some questions in the Q&A. So if you just bear with me while I go into that space, it's taking a while to load. All right, wonderful. So I'm going to go to a few questions in the last 5 minutes. So I have a question here from Priya. Priya's question is to you, Danny. And Priya is saying she's interested to know if over the period of time your position your position that you advocated banning the ban of AI has changed, considering the exploitative nature of ChatGPT, Gen AI creation. Like, how have you managed that, Danny, in your role?
So it's a good question. We need to keep front of mind the destructive nature of all technologies, I think, and generative AI is, just as Jess said, the next one along the chain. I think the ban of AI in terms of UCIT policy is more kind of around bringing policy in line with reality, as opposed to forcing people to use AI. We're not about forcing the use of AI. We're about bringing policy in line with reality.
Okay, thank you, Danny. I'm going to go back into the chat again to see if there are any further reflections. Thank you so much. Does anyone want to share a front of mind reflections? The chat has been so active this morning. Does anyone want to jump off mute and share a reflection?
Hi, Kashila, it's Kath here. I just wanted to kind of culminate the whole engagement with this panel this morning. And one of the key things that I took away was in my head, I've been grappling with all these questions, and it's actually wonderful to see that others are thinking in the same way. And for me, it's kind of given me more guidance, more structure, and actually, like Danny was saying, it's actually pointed to who I want to be with the choices I make. So that was really one of the insightful things I gathered today. Thank you.
Absolutely, Catherine, and I thank you for sharing that. And I think that's exactly how I feel as well, that this conversation has, again, from the perspective of these diverse voices and thought leaders, kind of given us permission to engage with that complexity, to really lean into the discomfort, to engage with that idea that there are no answers in most cases, and that we each have to navigate this, in our own way. I see, Alison, you have your hand up. Would you like to come off mute?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to agree with Kath and I've just enjoyed following the chat as well. And I once again feel like I'm part of a community that have a shared vision in navigating this space. I have had growing discomfort is probably an understatement with the way that universities are being encouraged to lean in and into AI as though it's just a good in and of itself, and being leaders in that respect. And if we come back to what CSU is in terms of our philosophy and our ethos, we look at sustainability, centering First Nations communities, diversity. I think this discussion has really brought us back into that space, and it's not an easy space to sit in, but just, yeah, thank you for the panel discussion and opening that up and seeing other following the chat as well. It's been a privilege to be part of, so thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, everyone. So I am very mindful of time, so I will bring this to a close. And Alison, I think you just, your comment, about our ethos at Charles Sturt, Yinjamara Winanaha, the wisdom to really live respectfully, in a world that is worth living in, and our responsibility that each one of us has a responsibility to care for the world and to lead others along in this journey, to support each other's. And I have to say that at Charles Sturt, the demonstration of that ethos of care is outstanding. So I know that I'm supported, as we all are, by many wonderful colleagues, both within the institution and outside the institution, who will continue to be kind of our friends, our critical friends, our advocates, who ask us challenging questions, but who also kind of partner with us in this learning journey that we're all on together. So that gives me so much hope, and comes back to what all four panelists were talking about, that humanity, that relationality, and that dialogue. So on that note, to our very fabulous panel, thank you so much for being here with us. It's just so amazing to be in your company, such a privilege, such a pleasure to be in your company, and to hear how you navigate this space. I will be watching the recording multiple times to engage with the depth of provocation, I think, that you've presented and put forward. And I hope we can invite you back at some point next year, hopefully, to keep this conversation going. So thank you, everybody. It's been such a wonderful opportunity for us at Charles Sturt to have you here. And to our audience, the chat has been amazing. And so I really do want to spend some time looking through it. It's been such a wonderful opportunity, everyone, and thank you very much for spending the time with us. So we're going to now close this session, and for those of us at Charles Sturt, we have a bit of an extended break before we reconvene at 1:30 p.m. for our celebration and acknowledgement session. So I do hope I see some of you in there, and then we will have a series of concurrent workshops at 2 p.m. to keep the conversation and the practice going, and the dialogue and the relationality and all those good things that we've talked about today. So Jess, Ruangi, Jonathan, Danny, thank you very much on behalf of our learning and teaching community. We wish you all the best on your leadership journey, on your advocacy, and all that work that you're doing in this space. Bye for now, everyone.
Thank you so much, everyone. Bye.